Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. Here's your host, Morgan Colby and Rick Lemon.
What's going on, Fantasy Champs? Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. My name's Morgan Colby. I got Rick Lemon with me as always.
What's up? What's up?
We're in episode over 400 here.
Oh my gosh, are we really?
Yeah, dude. We've had a lot of shows. My thing says 411. Since the beginning. Our first show, we talked about Todd Gurley in the Super Bowl against the New England Patriots.
Wow. That is nuts. We've been doing this for a couple years.
I feel like that's eons ago.
I know.
But anyway, yeah, welcome to Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. Last week, we did an edition of must-draft players, and we talked about must-draft wide receivers and hit that position. Today, we're going to talk about the must-draft running backs, a very, very important position in fantasy football success leading into the NFL draft. Next week, we're going to do some more dynasty content pertaining to the NFL draft, but it's starting to get into that time of year. May, June, July, and August. You start to see more and more people get engaged in fantasy football, start trying to, or redraft fantasy football and start trying to get ready for their drafts.
Most people get engaged around there too.
Yeah.
You said most people get engaged around August, and then you kind of pause. And I was like, what is he talking about?
Most people get engaged around no. Well, you know, that could be true. I don't know what the metrics are on that, but anyway.
I have no idea.
No, so yeah, I mean, people will start doing, fantasy mock drafts coming up just in May, June, and July, and then, draft month happens, and things start rolling. So we're getting closer and closer to the NFL season. Once the draft is over, you have OTAs, you have rookie mini camps, you got the mini training camp before training camp, and then you got training camp, and then you got preseason. So we got some ways to go, but we're going to try to give you some pre-draft. I feel like after next week, we're going to actually be able to discuss redraft a lot more effectively.
Yes. We'll have a much clearer picture of what's going on in 2022.
So, and there's still some guys in free agency like Julio Jones, Odell Beckham Jr., who have not signed with a team yet. There's a lot of guys, I think, waiting for after the NFL draft because that'll drive their value up a little bit in case teams didn't get the players that they wanted. So I think that's what they're waiting for. So we still got to wait for some of those little flyers to come in. But we're going to give you our must-draft running backs for today. So before we do that, check out our website, fantasychampions.com. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or any other podcasting platforms, please leave a review. Share this podcast with your friends. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, click the bell for notifications, like, and comment down below who is a must-draft running back for you and which guy you like on our list. So you ready to get cracking with this must-draft running back list?
Yeah, let's do it, bro.
All right, let's talk about the first guy on the must-draft running back list, and I think it's by far me and Rick and I's. I'll do that with proper.
Come around 1 year later.
What'd you say?
You said you kind of came around 1 year later, even though you did draft this guy. So I guess you came around in August.
I just traded him in a league I just joined.
Yeah.
So
Wait, what?
You remember that league you put me in?
Yeah.
So I didn't need an extra guy. I traded Javontay Williams in that league.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you didn't see that trade?
I didn't see that.
I don't even
You're
know.
an idiot.
What? I mean, I got a bunch of quarterbacks, so.
What'd you get for him?
I don't remember.
Oh,
it's been so long.
It must have been someone good.
Yes,
hopefully.
It was. And then the person traded him 5 minutes later because why not? So anyway, we're going to talk about the first running back on the must draft list, who is Javontay Williams. And Rick and I think are going to be bullish on this running back all offseason going into the regular season. And there's a lot of reasons why this guy is probably going to shatter fantasy football leagues. But Rick, give me your thoughts on Javontay Williams.
Yeah, he was, I think, better than expectations. And I had him going into the draft last year as my RB2 behind Najee. And I actually think in some ways he was better than Najee Harris when he had his opportunity.
Yeah.
As a pure runner, he reminds me so much of Nick Chubb. He was fantastic last year on the ground in a really bad offense, if we're being honest. Like the 4.4 yards per carry does not do him justice for what he was able to do last year. And splitting time with Melvin Gordon, he still had 200 rushing attempts his rookie season. So if he can do that with Melvin Gordon, what is he going to do without Melvin Gordon, who, yes, could re-sign with the Denver Broncos? And I think that's sort of a variable that you were talking about, what happens with that running back room. But even with Melvin there, I think he's going to be the guy instead of a 50-50 split like it was last year. It's going to be more like a 65-35 where it's Javontay. And now he's in a probably 5 times better offense, maybe more, with Russell Wilson in there. I think it changes the whole dynamic of that offense. And you're going to see potentially a lot more touchdowns from Javontay. Yeah. He had 7 total in 17 games last year. I could see him getting like 13, 14 touchdowns this year. And if that happens to go with his production on the ground, you're looking at a potential RB1 next year.
And I'd like to say too, like Javontay had a 49.9% snap per share last year.
Yeah.
Which ranked 31 among, I think, starting running backs in the NFL. Or at least running backs that started a game in the NFL, I should say. But he still ended up with 203 carries, 43 receptions, 7 touchdowns, and like over 11 or 1,200 yards. If he gets anywhere up towards 60% snap share, like all of these metrics are going to increase. You know what I mean? Like you're going to see him around the 250 in carries. You're going to see him maybe hit like 50 to 60 receptions. Like this guy has such a high ceiling for what can be done.
Workhorse.
It's unbelievable. And he has his efficiency metrics. 4.4 yards per carry is not, it doesn't speak like justice to the Denver Broncos, and they're not a good football team, and their offensive line wasn't great last year. So now that they got some pieces on the offensive line figured out, they got the most important asset, which is the freaking quarterback, figured out. Their running back is definitely going to have an increase in efficiency, but he was number 8 in juke rate, 32.9%, number 6 in evaded tackles, 81, really good. 81 evaded tackles.
That's actually ridiculous if you think about it.
It is, and I think after the season was over, there was a PFF statistic. I can't remember what the exact number was, but he broke, I think, the highest percentage of tackles of any running back in the NFL.
Yeah, that makes sense.
He's an
considering
amazing,
what his touches were.
He's an amazing pure runner, and he also has the ability to pass catch.
According to Player Profiler, too, he was 6th in the NFL in yards created. That's ridiculous.
Like, you give this guy a full workload, he's a bowling ball. He's going to take a lot of opportunity. And I think for me, like, I think his ADP in underdog leagues is 14. So he's going off the board basically early second round. Yeah. And so basically that gives you an opportunity out of 12 teams in the first round, wherever you pick, to draft Javontay Williams. I'll tell you that much.
Honestly, if he's by himself, they don't bring, let's say this scenario, Melvin Gordon signs with Baltimore, and Denver drafts like a receiving running back in the 4th round or something like that as a depth guy.
Right.
I'd probably be willing to take Javontay as high as the 1-6.
Wow.
In the draft. Wow. I mean, who, like, after Jonathan Taylor, if you're in a PPR league, McCaffrey probably, maybe Eckler, Derrick Henry, that's your top 4.
Right.
And then it's like Najee Harris at 5. And then you're getting into Dalvin Cook, Joe Mixon.
Right.
Nick Chubb, like Fournette. Right. I think I'm taking Javontay over all those guys in that scenario.
Yeah. just on the sheer upside.
Right.
Like, this guy has
what he's capable.
He's capable of doing a lot, and I think the biggest.
I don't have the stat. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say the running back position too is very reliant on how successful an offense is. So, if Russ never got traded to Denver, I think my feelings about Javontay Williams would still be high.
Yeah,
he would probably be a late second, early third round pick at that point for me, at least, where I would be comfortable with taking him. But I'm comfortable with taking him exactly where Rick said, 6 or 7, because I think there's very high upside with this kid because he gets a massive upgrade at quarterback, which not a lot of players like him get unless they leave football teams. So I think for Javontay Williams, he gets a big upgrade at quarterback, which means the offense is going to be more efficient, and I think he's going to get a high percentage of opportunities on the ground, through the air, and to score, and that's going to turn into large chunks of fantasy points. If you put this guy at 300 touches on the season. He had 0.8 fantasy points per opportunity last year. I think that jumps up to 9. He's going to be somewhere around 275 fantasy points, which is a very, very good season. This guy has a very, very deep sleeper potential of finishing as like a top 2 or 3 running back in 2022.
Yeah, just say it, bro. Just say it.
I did. I said it.
No, go one step further. I know you want to. Go ahead.
He has a very high percentage of being a top 2 or 3 running back in fantasy football for 2022.
As he has potential to be the RB1 in all of fantasy.
Yeah, that's true.
If those scenarios play out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say, I don't have a stat for this, but I know he had at least like 3 or 4 runs last year that he broke off for like 40 yards and it got called back. Like, I think out of every running back in the league, he had the most big plays that got called back. I would love to see a stat for that. Like 20-yard runs or something like that. Yeah,
20-yard runs that came back from holding.
Yeah. I think he would be in the top 5 at least for that. But yeah,
unfortunately,
that
doesn't translate. That happened to Dobbins too a lot in his rookie year.
Special talent. Now, let's say Melvin Gordon does resign. You still take him in the first round?
I'm more comfortable with him late second because I do think even maybe mid second, and I say this because I do think that despite Melvin Gordon's like appearance in Denver or reappearance in Denver, I feel like it wouldn't be detrimental to Javontay Williams.
I think Javontay is going to be the guy there.
Yeah, I think he's going to be
no matter what.
No matter what. So I'm not scared of him. I don't think he has as high a ceiling as he does without Melvin Gordon.
Yes,
so we'll have to see where that situation goes. But as of right now, without Melvin Gordon on the team,
we're still drafting him. Yeah. Is the main
must draft either way.
Right.
But let's move on to the next guy, number 2, which is Deandre Swift. Now, I love Deandre Swift, and Rick loves Deandre Swift, and Rick loves Deandre Swift more than I do.
Yes, sir.
And Swift is a special receiving talent. In PPR leagues, he is a must draft because let's assume the inevitable does happen, which is, Jared Goff sticking at quarterback for Detroit. Even if they draft somebody, like either way, because a lot of people are like, how does a rookie quarterback change his value? I really don't think it would if a rookie quarterback ended up starting. But assuming Goff comes in, like Goff is going to pass it to him a million times again. It's not going to change. Last year, receiving wise, in 13 games played, he had 78 catches. 62 catches, 78 targets. And he was pacing out, trying to pull up those numbers now, but he was pacing out at similar target share numbers as Alvin Kamara in his best seasons. Which is, once my computer loads, that's 102 targets, 81 catches, 591 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns. The area that I think there needs to be some improvement is he had some games where he early in the season, I think the first before he ended up getting hurt the first 10 weeks of the season, he had 200. He was on pace for 233 carries, 114 targets, and 90 catches, which is over 300 opportunities. And then he got hurt against Detroit. Against Chicago, I should say.
That was the Thanksgiving game.
Yeah, the Thanksgiving game. Came out of that game, missed 4, and then came back against Seattle. He had 4 carries for 32 yards, 2 catches for 7 yards, and then the next week he had 7 carries for 30 yards, 4 catches for 16. So he started against Green Bay. He was eased back in against Seattle. Really didn't get an opportunity in the last 6-7 weeks of the season to show what he did earlier in the season. But if you take what he did through the first 10 weeks of the season, like, that's insane. And I think he is, like, nothing has changed for Detroit besides, didn't they add an offensive lineman?
They added I believe a guard, a depth offensive lineman here and there, and then DJ Chark.
Yeah. So I think their offense, Rick and I have talked about how Detroit could have a sleeper
underrated
offense. Yeah, that people say is going to suck, but actually doesn't. And if you look at Deandre Swift from weeks 1 through 9, he was the RB10. Weeks 1 through 10, he was the RB10. So, he was getting high-end production and very efficient with the opportunities he was getting. I think the biggest thing for Swift, because he also had an 0.91 fantasy points per opportunity. So if he goes on to have 300-plus opportunities next year, he's going to be somewhere in the top 5. I think he can be a top 5 running back. The concerns with him, obviously, are Detroit's offense being good. If that doesn't, if we're right and their underrated offense ends up being better than people think it is, then I think that's good for DeAndre Swift. But it could easily go the other direction where they're just really bad, and Swift doesn't get as many scoring opportunities as you'd like to see. But in PPR, if you're getting 62 catches in 13 games, I mean, that's a must draft.
Yeah. And it's funny because if you go further, so just a little bit further, the first 11 weeks of the season in PPR, he was the RB5 in fantasy, and he was right behind Najee Harris and Derrick Henry. Mm-hmm. So he was almost a top 3 running back.
I was trying to find that because I knew he was that high, but I was trying to figure out where that number was.
It was weeks 1 through 11. He was, so it was the game right before Thanksgiving where I was super high on Swift, and I was like, this dude's an RB1, and then he got hurt, and that was it in the first quarter.
Yeah.
And that was pretty much it for the rest of the season. And then they kind of just eased him back in. They didn't want him to get rehurt. And even games like against Cleveland, I feel like they underused him. Like, they didn't use him as much as they could have. And in some ways, it felt like they were kind of preserving him for longevity. And I think this year could be the year where he really just breaks out and they kind of let him loose. He's not going to be a guy that gets 300 carries on the ground. But if he can get, 62 catches in 13 games is ridiculous. He's in that stretch where he was paced out those first 11 games. He was on pace for 90 catches. So you do something like that, you're McCaffrey level when it comes to receiving.
And I was going to say too, like, obviously, that would be the ceiling is Christian McCaffrey. But Kamara is a great comp to this because Kamara gets a lot of receiving work. But the big thing about Alvin Kamara that not a lot of people realize is that I don't even think if he hit it this year or not, but I can't remember if he hit it this year or not, but he's never had 200 carries in a season, Alvin Kamara, and he's been a top 5 running back multiple times.
And that's a good comp for Swift because I think that's going to be kind of the same thing.
But I think he gets more rushing opportunity than Kamara.
He had 151 in 13 games. So in a 17-game season, if he plays 17, you're thinking he gets at least 200 carries. And if he does that with what he's capable of doing, he could be insane. So his fantasy points per game, and this includes the game he got hurt in the last 2 games of the season where he was barely used, he was still 8th among running backs last season in fantasy points per game. We talked about with Javontay the yards created stat. Mm-hmm. I think Javontay was 6th, 7th?
Yeah.
In yards created. Yeah. Swift was 5th. So Swift is also that kind of really, different kind of runner, completely different kind of runner, agile. But is able to make guys miss at a high rate. Mm-hmm. Yards created per touch, he was 1st in the NFL. So he's a very agile running back. He's obviously in the name, Swift. He's very swifty with the ball.
Ironic.
I think he's somebody who I really want to draft a lot more this year. Ooh, I drafted a little bit last year, not as much as I wanted to, like in our home league when you drafted him right in front of me, which was a sad moment for me. But in the Lions offense that we have talked about before on this show is, I'm not telling you it's a top 10, top 12 offensive league. No. It's not. But when people think of the Lions, they think like bottom 3 offense. It wasn't. It was 22nd, I believe, in the NFL last year, 23rd. It was in that range. Right. And you add a guy like DJ Chark, you add some pieces to the offensive line, and they're actually healthy. It's probably a top 20 offense, which isn't anything super crazy, but that will get the job done for Swift.
Yeah, I agree. We got to move on to the next guy. But
those were our 2 favorites anyway.
I love Swift. Those 2 guys are definitely our favorites. The next guy is a little bit deeper. It's J.K. Dobbins from the Baltimore Ravens. Now, there are some rumors fluttering around the ether that Melvin Gordon worked out with Baltimore and that he could sign there, which would, I think, kind of damage some of J.K. Dobbins' value. But Baltimore is a type of football team that they want to get back to what they were doing. Gus Bus got hurt last year. J.K. Dobbins got hurt last year. She's freaking their 3rd running back, tore his ACL last year.
What was it, Justice Hill? Right?
Yeah, Justice Hill or something like that. So, like, they had 3 backs that got hurt. They had to go to the waiver wire. I remember this week 1, they were literally, like, scouring
Tyson.
McDonald's.
What was his name? Tyson Williams.
Williams. Yeah, they were scouring, the streets.
McDonald's parking lots.
Yeah, McDonald's parking lots. But anyway, so they're going to get some guys back this year. I don't think they necessarily are excited about Gus Edwards. You know, he was already kind of a little bit older, coming off an injury. I don't think they really want to use him as a second guy. I think he'll probably be relegated to like they could use him this year as a second guy, but their interest in Melvin Gordon would suggest to me that they want to find a guy similar to what Gus Edwards was doing. They don't want to give him a workhorse like workload, but they're a team that likes to run the football a lot, and they have a lot of carries every single season. So it's not a situation where if Melvin Gordon, like Denver, they're going to pass it with Russ. Russ has wanted to get out of Seattle for a couple years now because he doesn't want anything to do with running the ball 700 times a year. And so I think Denver is going to pass it a little bit more. But for the Baltimore Ravens, their offense is running it. They could legit give 250 carries each to both running backs. You know what I mean? Like, and it's just how they run their offense. They're not a team that throws 40, 50 times a game. They throw when they need to, and they use the ground game to do that. Last year, they had to go away from that a little bit because they didn't have a running back, essentially. So with that being said, Dobbins comes in. I'm not really concerned about Melvin Gordon taking work from him. I think one of the running backs they have is going to do that anyway. But I think he's a guy that's going to get 240, 250 carries next year. My big concern with J.K. Dobbins is he's not a pass catcher. Lamar doesn't throw it to running backs, and that's not how their offense runs. So Dobbins is not going to be a 30 catch per year guy. He's not even probably going to be a 20 catch per year guy. He's probably going to hit like Derrick Henry's 10 to 15 catches. So where he's really going to need to rack things up is in the rushing department. He's really going to have to hit, I think he's going to, in order to break out and be a top 5 running back this year, he's going to have to get 300 carries, similar to what Derrick Henry puts down on the ground. I don't know if they're going to give him that many, but 250 is fine. I think the value of where he is right now, he 100% is a must draft. I think he was supposed to be a friggin' early second round pick last year before he got hurt.
Yep.
And everyone's kind of faded out on him a little bit because some other guys are coming into the equation. I think J.K. Dobbins is a must draft running back.
Yeah, if the reason you're fading him is because that he tore his ACL, I mean, to me, that's dumb because modern medicine, right?
Yeah.
We've seen Cam Akers came back from a torn Achilles in like 5 months. I mean, I'm not saying it's that, but I think he'll be fine. And then if you're fading him because the Ravens just have too many guys. I think that's also kind of because I think Dobbins is going to be the guy. Yes, they're going to use Gus Edwards, but Dobbins will be the guy.
Yeah.
And you said like 10 catches. I think he can do a little bit more than that. I mean, his rookie season, he played 15 games and he had 18 catches.
Yeah.
So I think he can get 20. Wishful thinking says 25. But in that range.
He's not as bad as Derrick Henry when it comes to
not quite catching, right. I think it's he's
just not in PPR leagues and even half PPR leagues. You're not going to be drafting him for his. It's like Damian Williams, right? I mean, not Damian Harris, I should say, not Damian Williams.
Right. But you're not drafting him as your RB1.
Right.
Right. You're drafting him as your probably RB2, maybe even RB3, depending on how your draft goes. Right. He's like a 5th round pick right now. 4th, 5th round pick, which is to me fantastic value for a guy who's gonna get. I think I agree with you. I think he's gonna get 250 carries on the ground.
He'll get close to that 300 opportunity threshold.
Yeah, and he's super efficient. I mean, running for 6 yards per carry as a rookie. Yeah. I know he's obviously not gonna do that, but it just shows how efficient he can be. I mean, I think he's one of the running backs who has a chance to be like a 5 yard per carry type of player. He was fantastic as a rookie. The Ravens as a team ran the ball 517 times last year. And that was low for them. That's a low year for them.
Number, yeah.
So with those guys back in the frame with Gus and Dobbins, I could see that going up to like 550. And if that happens, I think Dobbins is a lock for 250 carries. And he gets 250 carries, he's going to be, I think, a top like 15 back.
Yeah.
And if you're getting that in the 4th, 5th round, I mean, it's easy value. Fantasy Pros has a RB22 right now.
Right.
I think that's just really good value. And if I'm sitting there and those first 21 running backs are off the board,
right,
and you got J.K. Dobbins or like Miles Sanders, I mean, I'm taking Dobbins 100 times out of 100.
Yeah. Yeah, totally agree. Anything else on Dobbins?
No, I think that's pretty much it.
All right, let's move to the 4th guy on our list, which is Elijah Mitchell, and we can talk about this guy pretty quickly. I'm not like before the show, we were talking about guys that could possibly be on this list, and
we have a couple of guys that we were deciding.
Yeah. When it got to the bottom of this, we were like, what guys do we really, really, really want? Like must-draft players that we think are going to be really good. And Elijah Mitchell did come up in this conversation, and we were hesitant at first because I think he's getting a lot of hype right now in the fantasy community, which is driving him way up boards to the point where he is kind of in this conversation of being like a 4th, 5th round pick, and I think it could go higher if people get more excited.
It could.
And there's hesitation there because he was a 6th round pick last year, which is replaceable. There's a situation where, not that San Francisco would waste draft capital on this, whatever capital they have left after trading all their picks for Trey Lance last year. There's a chance that they could go after the running back position again and draft a guy in the 2nd or 3rd round. I mean, they drafted Elijah Mitchell, ended up being the guy, but they drafted another running back in the 4th round, Trey Sermon. And so there was another guy there that they drafted higher. And I think that this guy is their guy that they want to be the running back for this team. They clearly invested the work into him this year. But there's concerns for me that next year he has a couple of bad games. All of a sudden they turn to Trey Sermon. Or they turn to a rookie running back that they just drafted. Like
in the 8th round.
Yeah, in the 8th round.
AKA undrafted.
Complete undrafted rookie, and they get a guy like... Right. So it's like, that's what scares me about Elijah Mitchell. But I think the value that he has here...
it's ridiculous,
and
actually.
The opportunity that he has... Like, I don't see ever a running back going in the 5th round that has the opportunity to get over 300 touches.
Yeah.
Like there's not many running backs.
That does not happen.
And so to me, that's what makes Elijah Mitchell. If he was a 2nd round pick, he probably wouldn't be on this list for me. If he was a 3rd round pick, he probably wouldn't be on this list for me. But just from the sheer 300, he has an opportunity that if he gets the same workload he got last year, he's going to be the featured running back, and he would definitely finish top 10. And to get that in the 5th round, that's Easy. That's an easy draft pick. That's smash. Must draft.
Yeah, I almost think it's like, I don't think he's going to get 300 carries just because he was used so much last year. I just don't know if that's going to happen again. But even if he gets like close to what he was on pace for last year, that'd be like what, 250, 260?
Yep.
I mean, that's ridiculous. And he's getting drafted below J.K. Dobbins, who we just talked about. He's getting drafted below
Javontay,
Swift,
Cam
obviously.
Akers.
Yeah, those guys. He's getting drafted below a lot of guys. I mean, Underdog has him right now at pick 55.
Yep.
That's, I mean, you're looking at like 5th round right there, around 5th round. So you're getting a guy like that who could get that kind of work in the 5th round. Like you said, you just don't see that.
It's worth the risk to me because, like, obviously, I look at the first 5 or 6 rounds of my redraft league as building the core structure of your team, you know, and like if you miss on those picks, like you can make up for it with later picks being just, you know, savvy and smart when drafting. But I feel like the core of your team, the foundation of your team is built in that first 5 rounds. So that's why I'm like a little bit like, okay, if Mitchell poops his pants and doesn't get workload, or Shanahan just decides to go with somebody else, that could change the value. But to me, I think it's worth the risk because the opposite end of the spectrum is 300 plus opportunities, which would turn him into a top 10 running back easily.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think he's got the sort of potential that you just don't see there at that spot. Like he's with guys like Damian Harris, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Miles Sanders again, Michael Carter. I just Chase Edmonds. Like you take Mitchell, who is going to have a potential workload every single time over those guys. Is there risk with Elijah Mitchell?
Yeah,
sure, especially if they draft a running back, which is a real possibility. But otherwise, if he can just do similar what he did last year, you're getting, again, a massive steal there. And he's a must-draft player.
Yeah, totally agree. The last guy that we have on this list, and I'll let Rick talk about him first.
Sure.
Is Travis Etienne. Very interesting player. I was hesitant at the beginning of the show, or the beginning of preparing for this episode, to put him on this list just because of, you know, like James Robinson being there, not really knowing how Doug Peterson is going to deal with that backfield. Like, I don't know what the Jags are going to do. Etienne was a 1st round pick, and he should be their featured running back, I would imagine. But James Robinson's also a very, very good running back. So it's like, you know, what do the Jags do? No idea. So I'm a little bit hesitant on Travis Etienne, but I still think, based on some of the things that Rick's about to bring up, he's definitely a must draft.
So I like James Robinson as a player, but you're right, he was undrafted. And the thing with Robinson is I told you this before, so he tore his Achilles. I believe it was the last game of the season or second to last game of the season. So it was in late December, I believe. Right. So if you're Cam Akers, then sure, that's a quick recovery. But for pretty much everybody else, it's not. Etienne is getting drafted a little high on Underdog. I think that's the highest I've seen him, which is 5th round, which still isn't that bad. Right. But on other sites, I've seen him go 6th, 7th round. Fantasy Football Calculator, he's 6th round. So he's kind of down boards here, and this is the guy who's going to start the year off at least as the guy in Jacksonville. His player comp coming out of college is Deandre Swift. I think in Jacksonville, that's kind of the role he's going to play. And he's teammates with Trevor Lawrence coming out of college. I think they're going to have a connection in the passing game. And that's one of Etienne's biggest strengths. We talked about that last year going into the draft. It's his ability to catch footballs. And they drafted him to be kind of not a utility player, but they're going to use him in multiple ways. At least that was the vision with Urban Meyer. But looking with the new coaching staff and Doug Peterson, I think they're still going to do the same thing and just get him kind of heavily involved in the passing game, whether that's end arounds, with the screens, just quick passes to him as well in third down situations. Like he's going to be the pass catching back. And it's a team that probably is going to throw the ball a lot. And I think Trevor Lawrence is going to trust his former teammate in Etienne. And like I said, he's going to get that shot in the beginning of the year as well as on the ground to prove that he will stay there. So it's a little bit of a flyer again. anyone in the 6th round, but you're getting a guy who has potential to be a 70, 80 catch guy.
Oh, yeah.
And if you're getting that, and he gets, again, kind of just like Swift, 150, 160 yard, or 160, even up to 200 carries.
Yeah.
You're getting an absolute steal in the 6th round of your draft.
I agree.
And if you're looking at just running backs in his range as flyer backs, again, Chase Edmonds, Clyde, Devin Singletary, Kareem Hunt, Tony Pollard, even Travis Etienne is, I think, a tier above all those guys. Right. And has a chance to really be at least a solid RB2 with potential to honestly be an RB1 depending on how they use him.
I think too, we've seen, because he obviously didn't play his first season in the NFL because of the ACL injury. And there's still a lot of questionable circumstances surrounding Travis Etienne for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I think the big point that Rick made was the fact that James Robinson has a good chance of missing or being placed on the PUP list to start the season. And that would give Travis Etienne 4 to 6 weeks to really give him an opportunity to steal that job from James Robinson. Because if he comes out hot,
Robinson's not getting it back.
He's not getting it back. So, and I think Doug Peterson would give it to him. I mean, obviously Robinson would have a role, but running backs go by the wayside so quickly. I remember when Jonathan Taylor got drafted, right? And, Marlon Mack came in and you saw Jonathan Taylor get drafted. And that year I was like, I really love Jonathan Taylor and I like where he went. But they have Marlon Mack. They have Naeem Hines. They have guys like Jordan Wilkins who they like. And what are they going to do with the running back position? Are they just going to give it to Jonathan Taylor? And it took 5 minutes before he got all the work because Marlon Mack tore his Achilles. And after that, Jonathan Taylor took the job and never looked back. And Marlon Mack is still an Indianapolis Colt, I think.
Actually, I think he's a Houston Texan.
Oh, that's right. He signed with the Texans, but he re-signed after his Achilles year with Indy last season, and didn't get any work.
Yeah,
he was basically their third back and relegated to complete. So, for me, if ETN comes in here in the first 4 or 6 weeks of the season and dominates, Robinson could very well be similar or put into that similar mold.
He will, I think, be put into that.
Because he's coming off that Achilles injury. It's going to take him time to get better. He was good last year, but he's an undrafted rookie. And this is a new regime here over in Jacksonville with Doug Peterson. I don't know if he cares that much if James Robinson is cut. I mean, obviously, if you have a weapon, you have a weapon and you want to utilize it. But I think Travis Etienne is going to steal that, and I think it's worth the risk. It's a 6th round pick. It's easy money for Travis Etienne.
Yeah, and people are like, well, he's coming off a big injury too, but his foot injury is, according to Player Profiler, is a 4 to 6 month repair.
Yeah,
that he suffered in August.
So, his ACL. I forgot about that.
No, yeah, it was a foot injury. I forget what it was exactly. It wasn't like a broken foot. It was, I don't remember, but it was a foot injury.
So he was ready to go in January.
Yeah, I mean, he probably, if they made the playoffs, we might have seen ETN. Who knows?
Jaguars.
So he's going to be 100. But by the time the season starts, he'll be 100% back to normal, ready to go. Well, James Robinson will not be, and I'm just very intrigued with what he can do in the passing game, like the Swifts, the Kamaras. He's that type of player.
Yeah, yeah. And I think too that when you get a rookie that comes into the NFL. Literally, like this year, say we get 2 rookie running backs, even if one goes to a situation where maybe he's not going to get a lot of opportunity, like J.K. Dobbins to Baltimore. It took him half the season, but they finally started funneling all of the work through J.K. Dobbins his rookie season. And I think for Travis Etienne, he's still a rookie who we haven't seen yet play in the NFL with basically all of the opportunity in the offense at this point. So there's massive upside there.
Right.
And I think usually a running back with that much upside gets drafted in the 4th round, maybe the 3rd round, when they first come to the NFL and they're on, a team that could possibly give them a lot of work. And he right now is going in the 6th round, and I don't think he's going to move up boards.
Yeah.
So.
No, I agree. I think he's going to stay around that 6th round, and it's good value.
Well, there you have it. There are some must-draft running backs.
I'm going to say honorable mention Leonard Fournette because I debated about putting
he's a good one. I like that. There's a lot of good ones. I like Cam Akers too.
Yeah.
But we have Javontay Williams, DeAndre Swift, J.K. Dobbins, Elijah Mitchell, and Travis Etienne on our must-draft running backs list. Next week's the NFL Draft. Got a lot of NFL Draft content coming up. Check it out. See you later, guys.
See you.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Champions Podcast. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes and YouTube, and follow us on Twitter @TheFFChamps.